Ladies and gentlemen, you ever walk into a room and everything shifts, the air thickens, heads turn, nobody knows why, but everyone feels it. That is not charm, it's not beauty, it's not even charisma. That's a powerful aura. It's not loud, it doesn't need to be. Power never begs for attention. It commands it silently. A powerful aura doesn't hustle for the spotlight. The spotlight follows. Watch the one who speaks less and listens more. Calm, but not quiet. Still, but not stuck. They don't try to prove themselves. They know there's weight in their presence, gravity. You see it in their eyes, not wide-eyed wonder, not the darting gaze of the unsure. No, it's a steady look. Focused, observing everything, judging nothing. They're not seeking approval. They're reading the room. They don't react. They respond, deliberate, controlled, sovereign. And let's talk energy. When someone with a powerful aura walks in, the energy shifts. Not because they brought energy, but because they are energy. People sit up straighter, words falter, jokes stop halfway, not from fear, from reverence, like something just entered that isn't entirely explainable. They don't interrupt. They don't chase. They don't flex. Because a powerful aura never moves in desperation. It moves in certainty, and that certainty, it's contagious. It doesn't scream, look at me. It whispers, you see me, and you do. You can't not look around. The loudest ones, often the emptiest, the brightest flash, gone in seconds, but a real presence, unchanging, unmoved, it lingers, long after they've left. That's the echo of a powerful aura. Presence commands attention without seeking it. This single line captures the essence of a powerful aura. Something that doesn't rely on performance or theatrics, but exerts a gravitational pull all its own. Presence is not about trying, it's about being. You don't have to announce yourself when you enter a room if your energy already does the talking. The most powerful people, the ones whose aura you remember long after they've left, are often the ones who didn't say much, didn't show off, and didn't need validation. Their presence spoke in silence. In any room, there are people who occupy space and people who own it. Owning it has nothing to do with how much space you take up physically, how loud your voice is, or how stylish your outfit may be. It has everything to do with the energy you carry. A person with a powerful aura doesn't push their way into attention. They don't dominate conversations, yet their words carry more weight than anyone else's. They don't have to say, look at me. People just do. It's involuntary. Why? Because something in them is centered, unmoved, whole. They radiate something that demands acknowledgement without making a demand. There's a magnetic stillness in them, not stiffness, stillness, the kind of inner peace that doesn't waver when surrounded by chaos. You can see it in their posture, relaxed but grounded. Their walk isn't rushed, it's measured. Their gaze doesn't dart, it lands. They don't scan the room for approval or scan faces for reaction. They are present in a way that makes you more aware of yourself. Suddenly, your own voice sounds louder in your head. Your own posture feels slightly off. You don't know why, but something about being near this person makes you tune in more, because they are already tuned in. Presence isn't about control over others. It's about control over oneself, the ability to be fully in the moment without trying to manipulate it. People with powerful auras are not trying to be impressive. They are impressive because they've stopped performing. There's no front, no act, just alignment. Their words align with their energy. Their energy aligns with their values. Their values align with their actions. There's no leak. That integrity, that seamlessness radiates. And people feel it, whether they can explain it or not. Have you ever seen someone in a crowded space just sitting there, not talking, not moving, just being? But somehow, your eyes keep going back to them. That's presence. It's not charisma. It's deeper. Charisma can be learned, faked, mimicked. Presence can't. Presence comes from depth, from knowing yourself so well that you don't need the room to affirm who you are. And ironically, that self-containment becomes a beacon. Because while everyone else is broadcasting insecurity disguised as confidence, the person with true presence broadcasts nothing, and that nothing becomes everything. When someone walks in with presence, the air shifts. People may not even notice it consciously, but something gets quieter, the noise drops a bit, conversations slow, people become more aware. It's not fear, it's alertness. As if nature itself is saying, pay attention. This person might not say a word for the next 10 minutes, but somehow they've already contributed more than half the room. They've set a tone. Their presence becomes a tuning fork for the space. And the most remarkable thing, people with presence often don't even realize the impact they're having. They're not concerned with the impression they're making. That's the paradox. They carry immense influence precisely because they're not chasing influence. Their sense of self isn't built on audience applause. They're not thirsty for approval. They don't scan for applause or feedback. They show up the same whether there are 2 people watching or 2,000. That consistency is a mark of power. In contrast, think about people who crave attention. Their energy is loud, yes, but erratic. It spikes and drops depending on how much attention they're getting. They may be the life of the party for a moment, but it fades quickly. Because the energy isn't coming from within, it's a reaction to the outside. That kind of attention seeking burns out. It needs constant refueling. Presence doesn't. Presence is a renewable energy source. Self-generated, quietly blazing. People with presence tend to slow things down, not because they're passive, but because they're not in a hurry to prove anything. In a world that races to speak, to show, to post, to push, presence pauses. It holds, it waits, and in that space of stillness, everyone else adjusts their rhythm. Their calmness becomes a mirror. You find yourself breathing differently around them, speaking slower, thinking more clearly. Not because they told you to, but because their energy made space for it. That kind of presence can't be manufactured. It's the result of internal work, years of choosing self, awareness over reaction, grounding over grasping. It comes from facing yourself over and over again, until nothing outside of you can shake what's inside. That inner foundation becomes visible in every outer interaction, and people feel it. They trust it. Because we're wired to recognize realness, even if we don't have language for it. Presence is also about restraint. The person with a powerful aura doesn't jump into every conversation. They don't share every opinion. They don't fight every battle. Their silence isn't absence. It's choice. And that choice gives their words more impact when they do speak. People listen because they know this person doesn't waste energy. There's discipline in their expression, a kind of elegance that makes even simple statements carry weight. Because you know they're not speaking just to fill the air. And this presence isn't limited to personality type. You don't have to be extroverted to have it. You don't need perfect posture or a commanding voice. It's not about being the loudest. It's about being the clearest. Clarity is power. When you're clear on who you are, what you stand for, and where your boundaries are, that clarity radiates. It doesn't need volume. It resonates. What's also true is that presence doesn't need to be explained. You can't quantify it. You can't pin it down in a checklist. It's not in the clothes, the tone, or the accolade. It's in the frequency. You either vibrate with inner alignment or you don't. People pick up on it. They sense when you're rooted, and they respond, often without knowing why. You've probably experienced this in moments of deep authenticity. Maybe during a heartfelt conversation when someone was just fully there with you. No phone, no distraction, no agenda, just full presence. You remember how that felt, right? It wasn't flashy, but it was powerful. That's the same principle. The people who bring that to every interaction, who make you feel like the moment matters, they leave an imprint. That's the energy of presence. There's also a kind of trust that forms around people with presence. Not because they've asked for it, but because they've earned it through consistency. They don't flip personalities depending on who's watching. They don't inflate or deflate to match the environment. They remain who they are, regardless of the room. And in a world of masks, that kind of constancy is rare and magnetic. Even in conflict, their presence shows. They don't escalate. They don't get loud to make a point. They don't flinch when challenged. Their stillness absorbs tension. They look you in the eye, steady, open, and that calmness disarms the chaos. You find yourself softening, even if you came in ready to fight. That's not manipulation, that's energetic leadership. True presence is spiritual, not in a religious sense, but in its connection to something deeper. It's a person who's made peace with their own shadows, who's met their own darkness and didn't flinch, who's forgiven themselves again and again until they became whole, and from that wholeness they walk, not with arrogance, but with groundedness, not to impress, but to be. And that being, in its purest form, becomes the most powerful kind of doing. So presence commands attention without seeking it, not because it tries to, but because it can't help it. It is the command. It is the attention. And in its silence, it speaks louder than any voice ever could. Calm observation outweighs loud expression. In a world where noise is mistaken for influence, where volume is often confused with leadership, and where performance is praised over perception, the value of quiet awareness is frequently underestimated. Yet time and time again, it's the observer, not the shouter, who holds the most power, the one watching, not performing, the one assessing, not asserting. And this principle, this deeply rooted truth, is one of the clearest signs of a powerful aura. There is something unsettling to people about someone who is simply watching, not judging, not reacting, just watching calmly, silently, because in that stillness there is power. The person who can stay still when others are scrambling, who can hold their ground when others are rushing to be seen or heard. It's a level of control that doesn't have to be explained, it's felt. Loud expression may momentarily dominate a room, but calm observation owns it. The loudness fades, the stillness lingers. You've seen this dynamic, you've felt it. Maybe in a meeting, a debate, a family gathering, where everyone's talking over each other, emotions running high. And in the corner, someone is silent, present, tracking every word, every movement, every shift in tone. They don't interrupt, they don't flinch, their eyes are steady, their face unreadable. That person changes the temperature of the entire room without saying a word. Because there's an unspoken truth in their quiet. I see everything. That kind of observation is not passive. It's active neutrality. It's a choice. It's not silence out of fear. It's silence out of discernment. The observer understands that speaking is not always the most effective way to exert influence. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is listen, not just hear. Listen to the energy behind the words, to the inconsistencies in someone's speech, to the shifts in body language. Loud expression misses those details. It's too busy trying to be seen. Calm observation, on the other hand, is collecting information, reading patterns, understanding motives, quietly stacking an invisible advantage. And let's be clear, the calm observer is not void of emotion. They're just not run by it. They may feel everything that others do, anger, excitement, doubt, but they don't let those feelings take the wheel. That restraint isn't weakness, it's power. Because while others are reacting, often impulsively, the observer is preparing. They're choosing if and when to act. And when they do, their words cut deeper, not because they're louder, but because they're precise. They speak only when they have something worth saying, not to fill silence, but to shift direction. You see this in leaders who never raise their voice, yet carry authority in every syllable. In the strategist who lets everyone talk before they weigh in with a few sharp sentences that change the whole conversation. In the friend who doesn't insert themselves into drama, but whose one comment brings instant clarity. Their power lies in what they withhold, not just what they offer, in what they perceive, not just what they declare. Loud expression often relies on force. It seeks attention to validate its existence. It yells to prove it has something to say. It interrupts to remind others it's there. It pushes, but calm observation pulls. It invites. It doesn't impose itself. It makes itself undeniable because people start to wonder what this quiet person is thinking. They start watching the watcher, and that subtle shift in focus is everything. The spotlight that loud expression fights for, calm observation naturally draws. There's also safety in calm observation. It creates space. It allows others to reveal themselves without provocation. You let people talk long enough, and they'll tell you everything, not just through words, but through slip-ups, tone, hesitations. The observer doesn't have to pry. They simply witness. And because they aren't emotionally entangled in the noise, they can discern truth from performance. That discernment becomes one of their greatest tools. While others are reacting to surface-level drama, the observer is seeing the deeper game, and when the moment is right, they move intentionally, strategically, with minimal effort and maximum impact. This approach isn't just powerful in social settings, it's essential in leadership. A leader who observes before acting, who listens before speaking, who waits before judging, creates an environment of trust and stability. People feel safe around them. They know this person isn't reactive, that they're not governed by ego, and that stability, that calm is contagious. It spreads, it calms storms, it anchors chaos. Loud expression may rally a crowd, but calm observation builds movements. Even in conflict, the dynamic is clear. The loud one thinks they've won because they spoke more. They believe dominance is volume, but the observer sees the weaknesses in the argument, the emotion behind the aggression, the inconsistency in the logic. And when they respond, if they choose to, they dismantle not with anger, but with insight. They don't need to shout. Truth doesn't need a megaphone when it's spoken from clarity. There's a spiritual quality to this kind of presence. The observer is often someone who has gone inward, who has spent time in solitude, reflecting, healing, understanding themselves. That internal journey allows them to detach from the need for external validation. They don't need the room to see them to know their worth. That self-knowing becomes a kind of armor, not to block others out, but to prevent being pulled in by chaos. It's not indifference, it's sovereignty. The ability to be in the storm and not become the storm. And let's not confuse calm with weakness. Calm can look gentle, but beneath it is force. Stillness can appear soft, but it holds power. Imagine a mountain, unmoving, grounded. The wind howls, storms rage, but the mountain stays. That's what calm observation is. It's choosing to stay grounded while the world tries to shake you. It's deciding that your response will be guided by wisdom, not ego, by vision, not noise. In today's culture, where we reward the loudest voice, where social media amplifies drama, where attention is currency, calm observation becomes a rebellion, a quiet revolution. It says, I don't need to shout to be seen. I don't need to prove myself to be valuable. I don't need to win every argument to hold truth. And in that refusal to participate in the noise, the observer becomes louder than all of it. There's also a kind of grace in calm observation, a respect for others' space, a refusal to dominate, an understanding that not every moment needs to be seized, not every silence needs to be filled, that patience isn't passivity, it's presence. It's the confidence to allow things to unfold, knowing that you'll move when it matters. That grace builds influence, because people feel respected, not coerced, seen, not managed, and that feeling, that's unforgettable. Another key aspect is how the observer handles tension. While loud expression often escalates tension through overreaction, accusation, defensiveness, the calm observer diffuses it simply by staying centered. They may not even speak, but their energy says, "This doesn't shake me." And in that, others find an anchor. You can't measure that kind of influence. You can't put it on a resume, but it changes lives. It saves conversations. It turns potential explosions into moments of growth. Even creativity benefits from calm observation. The artist who steps back from the canvas, the writer who reads before they write, the entrepreneur who studies the market before launching. The calm observer gathers insight that becomes innovation. They're not distracted by the urge to produce constantly. They understand that vision requires space. That observation breeds originality. While others are replicating trends, the observer is identifying unseen opportunities. And when they create with depth, with precision, with soul. Children feel it too. They gravitate toward calm presence. They sense safety. Animals even more so. You can't fake calm with an animal. They pick up on the real energy, and they trust those who are quietly aware. That should tell you something. Real presence is energetic, not performative. Loudness doesn't equate to trust. Stillness does. There's an elegance in knowing when to speak and when not to, when to act and when to observe. It's a dance, and the calm observer knows the rhythm. They don't step on toes. They don't rush the music. They wait. And when their moment comes, their movement is seamless. It looks effortless, but it came from long, silent watching. This kind of presence doesn't need recognition. It doesn't crave validation. It is enough in its own awareness, and that makes it magnetic. People may not understand why they feel safer, clearer, more seen in your presence, but they do, because you're not trying to dominate them. You're witnessing them, and that, being truly seen without judgment, is one of the most powerful things you can offer. So while the world celebrates loudness, remember the strength of the still one, the one who sees more because they're not trying to be seen, the one whose power comes not from how much they say, but from how much they understand. The calm observer is not behind. They are not lacking. They are simply building, quietly, intentionally, from a place of clarity the noise can never touch. Energy shifts around those with inner certainty, not because they demand it, not because they chase it, but because certainty, when it's real and deeply rooted, moves the unseen. It bends space in subtle ways. You won't always notice it consciously, but you feel it. The room adjusts, the pace changes, conversations lean in, doubt steps back. Inner certainty isn't about ego. It's not arrogance. It's not the illusion of confidence that comes from shouting the loudest or walking the hardest. It's the quiet, unshakable knowing that says, I am who I am, with or without your agreement. When someone walks in with that kind of energy, people feel it before anything is spoken. Their aura isn't about charisma. It's about frequency. They're tuned into themselves, and that tuning creates a ripple in everything around them. They don't adapt to the noise. They set the tone. Even in chaotic spaces, even in unstable dynamics, they remain aligned. Their inner compass doesn't get thrown off by disapproval, confusion, or tension, and that alignment becomes contagious. Others find themselves either adjusting to match that energy or quietly stepping away because they can't. Inner certainty doesn't make you rigid, it makes you grounded. There's a difference. Rigidity is fear pretending to be strength. Groundedness is knowing you don't need to react to everything that tries to pull you. You're not fragile, you're not reactive, you're not panicked about being understood. That calm, rooted energy doesn't have to defend itself. It doesn't have to explain. And that lack of over-explaining, overcompensating, or oversharing is what makes people pause. Because we live in a world addicted to explaining itself. And suddenly, here's someone who doesn't need to. That's rare. That's power. You don't have to force respect when you carry certainty. People give it without being asked. It's in the way they hesitate before speaking to you, in the way they adjust their tone, in the way they check their energy before they approach. Not because you intimidate, but because your presence holds a mirror. People instinctively become more aware of themselves around someone who's fully aware of who they are. You don't have to say, "I know who I am." Your silence already said it. This kind of energy doesn't fluctuate based on who's watching. It's consistent. That consistency becomes influence. People notice that you're the same whether it's a crowded room or an empty one, whether you're praised or ignored, whether others are watching or not. That unshakable consistency creates a sense of trust. Even in strangers, you feel like someone who can't be manipulated, someone who won't mile their way through dishonesty, someone who won't shift their truth to match the mood of the room. You become the anchor when everyone else is drifting. And this isn't about dominance. This isn't about controlling others. It's about being so deeply in tune with your own essence that other people's projections don't stick. You're not living on borrowed energy. You're not sourcing your power from outside reactions. Your identity is not a reflection, it's a flame. It burns regardless of who's around. And when people come close, they either warm themselves by it or step away because they're not ready to meet that heat. That's why people with inner certainty often attract polarized responses. Some are drawn to them instantly, like gravity. Others are uneasy around them, even if they can't say why. It's because certainty confronts everything that's unsure, inconsistent, or inauthentic. Not with force, but by simply existing. It's threatening, not because it attacks, but because it reveals. It shows you who you are in contrast. And if you haven't found your own center yet, that kind of reflection can feel like exposure. People with this kind of aura don't chase attention. They attract alignment. The right conversations, the right connections, the right opportunities tend to find them, not through effort, but through resonance. When your energy is aligned internally, the external begins to shift in response. Not always immediately, not always in ways you expect, but over time, consistently, reality adjusts to the frequency you're holding. People start treating you differently. Situations unfold with more synchronicity, not because you're manifesting through effort, but because you've become a clear signal, and clear signals don't attract noise. This is why someone with a powerful aura doesn't need to overintroduce themselves. Their presence introduces them. The way they hold eye contact, the way they walk into a space, not rushing, not apologizing, not needing. The way they listen, the way they don't need to fill silence. All of it speaks. All of it communicates certainty. And that communication is more effective than anything verbal, because it bypasses logic. It hits the body. People feel it before they process it. This energy also makes boundaries clearer. When you carry inner certainty, you don't have to defend your boundaries with aggression. They're naturally understood. People don't test you the same way. They don't assume they can push, pull, or sway you. They read the line, not through what you say, but through who you are. And if they do cross it, you respond from clarity, not chaos. From stillness, not spite. That difference disarms manipulation. It renders drama ineffective. Because when you don't give someone the reaction they're fishing for, their control evaporates. In relationships, this kind of energy brings peace, but also transformation. You don't attract people who want to play games. You attract people who want to grow, and sometimes that means you challenge them without trying to. Just by being who you are, your calm disrupts their urgency. Your clarity confronts their confusion. Your boundaries highlight their lack of them, not through critique, through example, and people either rise or retreat. You start noticing how people act differently around you, not because you're better, but because your frequency requires authenticity, and not everyone is ready to be real. Some people are so used to dynamics built on codependency, projection, or performance that your certainty feels foreign. But for those who are ready, your energy becomes medicine, a stabilizer, a blueprint. This kind of certainty doesn't come from a single realization. It's forged in solitude, in the long, quiet hours of self-inquiry. In the nights you chose reflection over distraction. In the moments you told yourself the truth when it would have been easier to lie. It's built by walking away from what doesn't align, even when it hurts. By saying no to what flatters the ego but starves the soul. By sitting in the discomfort of not knowing until you find the knowing that can't be shaken. That inner work, the invisible kind, is what builds the aura everyone else sees. Because this isn't about image. Anyone can look confident. Anyone can fake poise. But energy doesn't lie. And your aura is simply your energy expressed. When your energy is rooted in truth, in alignment, in self-trust, people feel it. Even when you say nothing, especially then, you may find that people start asking for your advice more often, or confessing things they haven't told others, or gravitating toward your presence during moments of uncertainty. Not because you market yourself as a guide, but because you are a guide by how you live. Your certainty becomes an anchor for those still tossed around by their own indecision. Your stability becomes an offering. And without effort, you start to lead, quietly, organically, energetically. You also notice how much less you need to convince people of anything. You don't argue as much. You don't try to prove your worth. You don't over-explain your decisions. You trust your gut, and that trust is visible. It shows in your posture, your tone, your eyes. That silent trust speaks louder than any defense ever could. And those who need to control or manipulate others lose interest in you quickly, because they realize their tactics don't land. That's protection. That's clarity in action. Even your presence in a room shifts group dynamics. Without trying to dominate, you influence. Without raising your voice, you lead. You don't chase credit, but people start acknowledging your input. Not because you asked, but because it resonates. It sticks. It adds value, and people remember how you made them feel. Steady, seen, safe. You're not shaken when others doubt you. Their doubt is about them. You don't personalize it. You stay rooted. You know what's yours and what's projection. And that discernment saves you energy. You stop trying to convince. You start choosing what you engage with, who you share with, where you spend your attention. That quiet discernment is how power operates. Even your silence starts to carry weight, because people have learned that when you do speak, it matters, so they listen differently. They pay attention, they lean in, and that's not because you crafted the perfect sentence. It's because your energy precedes your words. You've shown consistency. You've shown self-trust. So your voice, when used, has gravity. Over time, the people around you change. The energy you attract shifts. Not because you cut people off, but because the mismatch becomes too obvious to ignore. You no longer fit into spaces built on pretenses. You no longer resonate with roles that require shrinking or pretending. And as you rise in certainty, others rise with you, or they fade away, not from conflict, but from contrast. You realize that you don't need to control outcomes. You influence reality not through force, but through frequency. When your inner state is clear, aligned, and unwavering, life responds, not always in the timeline you expect, but in alignment with the energy you hold. And so you keep tending to that energy, quietly, diligently, like a fire that must be protected, not from others, but from neglect, because when your certainty is intact, everything else aligns around it. Conversations shift, opportunities unfold, confusion clears, not through effort, through resonance, through the undeniable frequency of someone who knows who they are, and who moves accordingly. People think influence is about volume, about making noise, about taking up space with loud gestures and bigger words. But the kind of influence that bends reality, real power, comes in silence. It comes in presence. It comes in the still, unwavering gaze of someone who doesn't flinch. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It doesn't demand attention. It becomes the center of gravity because it doesn't need to be. People with a powerful aura don't need to prove they're in control. Their influence isn't imposed, it's absorbed. You walk into a room and somehow everyone knows who holds the true center, and it's not always the one talking the most. Sometimes it's the one who listens so fully, the room rearranges itself around them. They sit still, but you feel the force of their being like a storm held behind calm eyes. There's no threat in their presence, yet there's something untouchable about them, something that doesn't bend to trends or tilt to opinions. They are not performers, they are not persuaders, they are transmitters. This influence is energetic. It is woven into the way they carry themselves. Their spine doesn't need to be stiff to communicate strength. Their steps don't need to be rushed to suggest importance. They don't mirror the room, they calibrate it. They don't react, they respond, and when they respond, it's intentional. Every word lands, every gesture has meaning. Because nothing is wasted, they are not leaking energy, they are not seeking validation. Their aura becomes a compass. Others begin to measure their own alignment by how they feel around this kind of presence. The way they make people feel isn't just about kindness or calm. It's about clarity. People feel seen by them, but more importantly, they see themselves more clearly in their presence. Because the energy of someone truly influential doesn't cloud or confuse. It sharpens. It makes you aware of your own energy. It calls you into coherence. And not because they told you who to be, but because they remind you, silently, of who you already are when you're not performing. That's influence, the kind that doesn't need words to shape the room. These are the people others consult before they move, not because they're afraid, but because something in them trusts the way this person holds decisions. Their influence has weight. Their opinions aren't thrown like darts. They're released like seeds, planted in silence, allowed to root in others' minds without force. And days or weeks later, those ideas bloom in someone's awareness. You don't even realize they've shaped your thinking until you hear your own voice echoing something they said once, softly. That's the reach of energetic influence. It stretches beyond the moment. It lingers. It shifts reality quietly. People with this kind of aura aren't rushing to be first. They don't need to interrupt to feel relevant. They don't need to dominate to feel secure. Their security is internal. And because of that, their influence grows without effort. People just start adjusting around them. They recalibrate their pace. They reconsider their tone. They remember their own truths. This isn't because they're being corrected. It's because they're being reminded of what real alignment feels like. The influence comes from contrast, from the sharp difference between scattered energy and rooted presence. There's also a kind of magnetism here that's hard to explain. These people can walk into a room and instantly become the silent center of attention without doing anything for it. They're not peacocking. They're not performing. They're not amplifying their voice to compensate. They are embodying. And embodiment is magnetic. When you are fully at home in yourself, when your body and your soul are aligned, when your intentions are clean and your words are precise, people notice. Not always consciously, but their body responds, their nervous system shifts, they lean in, they listen longer, they remember you. You start to notice people repeating your phrases, quoting your lines, copying your mannerisms, not because you asked them to, not because you marketed yourself, but because resonance creates reflection. Your presence becomes a template. People shape themselves around what feels clear, what feels real, what feels grounded, and suddenly you're influencing behavior, not through command, but through coherence. This influence also shows up in conflict. When tensions rise, these people don't escalate. They neutralize, not by overpowering, but by staying aligned. Their energy is so stable that chaos finds no grip. Arguments can't hook into them. Manipulation slides off. They hear what's not being said. They feel what's beneath the words. They don't defend every attack. They discern, and that discernment becomes power. It diffuses dysfunction. It exposes games. It cuts through noise. Others might scream to win the room, but the one who doesn't flinch becomes the true authority. Influence doesn't always sound like dominance. Sometimes it sounds like restraint. They also don't seek the spotlight, but when it lands on them, they don't shrink. They don't hide their light to make others comfortable. Their influence isn't about stealing attention. It's about holding it with grace, with poise, with the kind of dignity that doesn't need to shout, "Look at me." They simply are. And people do. They hold the room because they hold themselves. Even their absence speaks. When they leave, people notice the difference. The room feels less grounded, the energy less stable, not because they controlled it, but because they anchored it. That kind of influence lingers. It isn't tied to physical presence. It becomes a frequency that others seek, miss, and sometimes chase. Because once you've felt the aura of someone fully embodied, it's hard to forget. They are mirrors too. Their influence doesn't always flatter. Sometimes it confronts. Just by being who they are, they highlight where others aren't. Not through judgment, but through resonance. You feel the gap. You feel the dissonance in your own life. And if you're ready, you rise. That's real influence. It doesn't tell you what to change. It makes you want to change, not for them, but because something in you wakes up in their presence. They don't use fear to move people. They use frequency. They're not driven by strategy. They're moved by alignment. And because of that, people trust them. Not just their words, but their being. That trust becomes the currency of their influence. Not popularity, not approval, not control, but resonance. And when you move with that kind of influence, you don't need to lead loudly. You just need to walk clearly. Others follow clarity. They don't force opinions into the space. They wait, they feel, they know when to speak, and when they do, it lands differently, because they weren't talking to be heard. They were talking to shift something, and people feel the difference. The silence before their words is a drumroll. The pause after is space to absorb. That rhythm becomes part of their power. They don't just speak, they conduct. And when they teach, it's not information. They transfer energy. You don't just understand. You remember. You don't just learn, you transform. They don't tell you what to believe. They help you feel what's true. That's influence beyond logic. It's cellular. It shifts something in your core. Something in your body says this is real, and that signal sticks with you longer than any fact. They don't manipulate, they don't coerce, they magnetize. Their presence becomes a sanctuary for those seeking truth, and a challenge to those hiding from it. And that dual effect isn't something they engineer, it's something they allow. They let their being do the work, because they know true influence isn't about getting people to move. It's about becoming so aligned, so steady, so true, that people move on their own. This influence is quiet, but it's not passive. It's intentional. It's curated by integrity. It's shaped by discipline. These people don't gain this energy by accident. They've done the work. They've sat with their shadows. They've healed their distortions. They've cleared out the noise. They've sacrificed illusion for depth. And it shows. You feel the depth. You feel the gravity. You feel the work. Not because they talk about it, but because they've become it. And because of that, they hold more than just presence. They hold permission. People feel safe being real around them, not because it's expected, but because authenticity is the only energy that matches. When you're in their field, you either rise or you retreat. Their aura doesn't force, it filters. You either meet it or you move. That's influence without effort. That's leadership without labels. They don't waste energy proving their value. They embody it. And when you embody something fully, you don't need to advertise. You don't need to announce. You become the quiet example, the one people mention when talking about presence, the one people reference when describing integrity, the one whose name carries weight not because of fame, but because of frequency. You begin to realize that people lean on your energy without even asking. They look to you for calibration, for clarity, for calm. And while that can be a responsibility, it's not a burden, because you didn't create it through performance. You created it through alignment, and alignment doesn't drain, it restores, because you're not trying to be someone. You're being who you are. Fully, unapologetically, consistently. This is the influence of someone who knows their frequency and guards it well, who doesn't dilute to be palatable, who doesn't conform to be liked, who doesn't sway to be accepted. They're not loud, but they are clear, and in a world full of noise, clarity is magnetic, clarity is power, clarity is rare, so their influence doesn't come from what they say, it comes from what they carry. And what they carry you can't fake, you can't download it, you can't mimic it, you become it.